Welcome, everybody, to another Microsoft Unboxed pod. This is episode 35. I am your host today, Kareem Anderson. I'm joined by.
David Allen, hope everybody out there is doing well, buddy. We're halfway to 40. We're getting old and experienced over here.
I know we got to start talking in terms of like Asgardian gods or something, like people who age very slowly. Because when we get up to like the hundreds of the episodes, we can't say we're getting old anymore. We'll just be old.
Yeah,
So
we'll
maybe
just be
this is
there.
our
We'll just be there.
yeah, this is our infancy. We're still toddlers. We're still toddling around on the podcast world. And our 35th episode of this pod. We also want to take a quick minute to wish and hope everybody's doing well who may or may not have been affected by the hurricanes the last few weeks.
Yes.
If you are getting your power back up, you're getting your water sanitized, you're getting your feet back underneath you, we welcome you back and we appreciate you at least taking the time out to listen to this pod when you could be dealing with so many other things. With that being said, it
And
was.
and I will say, hopefully, something on this pod, if it's just for a few minutes, hopefully it brightens your day because I know there's a lot of people here that are struggling. I know there's a lot of people down in Florida where you are that are struggling. So if we can bring a moment where you can forget about it, we're happy to do that.
Yeah, we're going to try to make it fun today. There's some crazy news as far as chipsets and gaming goes. Operating systems, we are in a ghost town. We are in a vacuum of news because Microsoft, I mean, the only thing I'm really concerned about is recall, and they have been absolutely silent when it comes to that.
They
As far
haven't
as the
said a
updates
word.
coming out, we got some small stuff, interface change for maybe the Microsoft Store and some things like that, but nothing big. So we're going to bring you the news about chips and gaming. Hope you guys will hang out with us. We will also not be talking about AI potentially. This may be an AI-free podcast for the first time in, I don't know, 2 years or so. So let's get you guys started with the headlines so I can stop talking and my co-host can take over. We will be running stories about Call of Duty Black Ops 6, Modern Warfare 3, and Warzone coming to cloud gaming, which could be a big test for Microsoft. And probably the whole reason why they bought Activision Blizzard. We're also going to be talking about how Google is expanding its migration tools um, for OneDrive users. So they are, trying to create a backdoor in order to gain cloud storage usage from Windows users, at least from OneDrive users, maybe not Windows. Um, we'll also be talking about how Microsoft wants, or at least brought up the topic of streaming your own games to the Xbox Cloud. If you're old enough, like myself or David, you maybe scratch your head going, wasn't this a thing a little while back and then it just kind of disappeared? Well, for some reason, they're bringing it up again. Then we're going to be talking about Intel cozying up to AMD because the enemy of my enemy is my friend situation when it comes to chipsets now. We are getting into a nice simmering cold war when it comes to chips again. It's been relatively quiet, at least for the Windows side of things, with Apple kind of sucking up all the air with its M series chips. But it seems like the sleeping giants have awakened and they are wrestling. We are also be talking about Qualcomm canceling its Snapdragon Dev Kit. Again, that was a thing that was mentioned back in June and seems to have gone under the radar, but it's back and it's unfortunately bad news. Then we'll be talking about Microsoft experimenting with the Lunar Lake chip for its potential Surface Laptop 7, which seems like an inevitability for a lot of people, but there is a smaller story underneath that about the direction of Surface laptops and the customizations going forward. Microsoft seemed to have kind of narrowed it down to just Intel chips for the last 2 years, and now they've kind of exploded that and opened it up to what could be AMD, Intel, and Qualcomm, and potentially MediaTek, depending on what device you're looking into. So you will have lots of options. With that being said, I am going to take a pause. David, take over with the first headline, please.
You got it, my friend. Have a sip of water. I'm going to talk about Call of Duty here for just a minute. Um, Actually, a little bit longer than a minute, most likely, but it's that time of year. Let's go ahead and get it out of the way. October 25th at roughly 10 a.m. Pacific time, it will be time to open up the cloud gaming to Call of Duty for the first time. So we already know that is the release day for Call of Duty Black Ops 6. So what you're getting is you're getting Call of Duty Black Ops 6, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, and the massive hit Call of Duty Warzone. Now here's the catch with that. We all know the game's coming, right? We know the game's coming. We know Microsoft has stop the dollar trial memberships for Xbox Game Pass Ultimate to get the most bang for their buck out of it. This is I can't understate how big of a moment I feel like this is for Xbox in general for the release. How well does Game Pass handle this? How well, what is the uptick? Do the marketing dollars pay for it? Do we see the $60 billion investment paid for right here? But for cloud gaming, this is perhaps the biggest to hit so far. Like another podcast said this morning, Call of Duty is always in the top 10 of gaming. And to see it on the cloud, I feel like it's a risk versus reward for Microsoft. As we know, the Call of Duty games are Twitch. You got to have that reaction time. You got to have that low ping. As you can see behind me, I've got a Lenovo on my right and a Lenovo on my left, and an Xbox to my right. I'm a game player. I'm excited for this, but I'm also worried for Microsoft because this could be a big win or a big lose for cloud gaming. If Call of Duty comes out, the servers function well. Gamers aren't complaining that their headshots are laggy, that their bullets are way off, or people are rubber banding when trying to run across the map. The servers hold up, the servers give the performance that the gamers expected. This is a huge win for Microsoft and cloud gaming as a whole.
I don't know
That's
about you, but I use all of those excuses, even on my local system. Like, hey, you know what? The servers, I missed that headshot. I couldn't focus because the servers, because everything's moving slow.
Mhm.
Not me. Not that I'm a poor shot. Not that I was in bad position. Not that I moved myself up by accident. It's all the servers' fault. Doesn't matter. So
or,
I'm going to
or,
keep
or,
using
or,
them.
you, or you or you threw the grenade and it bounced off the wall and you blew yourself up.
It's the physics. It's the physics, man. I'm telling you, the
but
game is
but
against me. But
I feel like this is it for Microsoft. I don't want to say this is it, as in if they doesn't do well, cloud gaming is over. But what we were talking about off mic, what happens here will influence the next experience for a certain period of time. For example, if any new shooters come out, the new Halo that you brought up, if there's a new Battlefield that keeps being teased, there's one called Delta Force Black Ops that has really gotten popular in the last couple of months on PC that's supposed to be coming to console later. If those games hit the cloud, the Call of Duty players are going to remember their experience, and that experience is going to carry over to the success or failure in the cloud of those new games. So I'm literally counting the days. I've not been this excited for a Call of Duty launch in many years. And as Brad Sam said this morning, Microsoft is doing the right things. They're pushing the marketing dollars. They're pushing it out there in front of us. You can get Call of Duty specialized controllers now that are themed. You can get wraps for your Xbox. And I'm sure there'll be other things leak out this week just to keep you on the edge of your seat. Let's see, buddy. We got 1025. So I believe 1025 is next Friday, right? Let's
uh,
see. Yep, 1025 is next Friday. So I'm going to make a deal with you. If I'm a little bit droopy eyed when we come to do the podcast next Friday, or I've, maybe I'm a little hyper because I've had a little too much coffee and caffeine, you'll understand because I'm going to be in front of a screen as long as health and happiness hold up playing Call of Duty next Thursday night at midnight. I can promise you that.
yeah, I think you've said everything there is to say about this. My only exclamation on this whole thing is that um, I'm glad to see that cloud gaming is still in the radar of Microsoft. I know they were pushing it hot and heavy for a quick minute, and then they've since lessened the marketing around it. Again, they've always had it; it's been part of your Game Pass and things like that. It's great. I'm hoping that, to your point, that this highlights that, and that people will then start seeing cloud gaming as a legitimate option versus a secondary convenience. Most people are saying, like, you know what, if I want to play a real game, I'll just download the game. Versus saying, I want to play a real game, I'm just going to grab my controller and grab my nearest screen and start playing.
Well, this also, and I'll button it up here, but this also makes you think about the Fire Stick deal that occurred recently. How many of those Fire Sticks are flying off the shelves right now just
Oh yeah.
I'm thinking about parents because
Hmm.
I've got a nephew that's 10. Now, he has me to turn to for all his gaming needs and technology needs, and he does that. He will say, hey, Uncle David, how do I do this? How do I do that? And I'll hook him up. But, you know, this is a test for the Fire Sticks, the Logitech G Clouds.
Yeah.
Everything is under a test right now. What can you handle? What can you do? And what's the growth pattern or success or fail rate? It's coming.
We shall see. We shall see. We'll check back in with you guys next week. That being said, moving on to our next topic, which is Intel and AMD somehow friends, frenemies. Is there?
I don't understand this one, but I
Uh,
do understand this one. What you
yeah,
got?
it makes sense when you flush it out. And so, what the story basically is about is that I believe earlier this week, the two have come together to announce the formation of an what they call the x86 Ecosystem Advisory Group. Uh, it's basically Intel and AMD have created an advisor group to ensure the compatibility and innovation within the x86 architecture. So we've been here on this podcast, on the internet, online. There's been a lot of talk about ARM, Windows on ARM, these Qualcomm Snapdragon powered PCs, and whether or not they are, can replace Intel devices. And for the most part, I think for like 90%, this is the Chromebook situation where for 90% of the stuff people do, these devices are great. If you're a content creator or gamer, look elsewhere. But for everybody else who is basically in data processing or content consumption, these devices will do perfectly well. But Intel and AMD are looking to basically fend off that narrative and say, hey, you know what? You can stick with the devices you currently have. We're just going to make it easier for developers to match the feature sets that are now going to be going future forward. The things that Qualcomm was able to kind of do with with their TOPSs and with their modern modems as far as connectivity, adding the latest Wi-Fi's and kind of all of those kind of things they were able to do a little quicker because they had all the milling and R&D set into mobile already, and they're just bringing a lot of those features over to the PC. Well, Intel's saying we're going to be able to create or redevelop or re-architect the x86 architecture to then get those features as well, because currently it's been such an old architecture that it takes us forever to do that. Not that we couldn't do it; it just takes us longer. So this is the idea that is going forward. Quote, the goal of the partnership aims to enhance software and hardware compatibility, simplify development, and introduce new features more efficiently. The industry support basically for this, and they've basically got everybody on board for it. So you're looking at what do I have in this report? I think it's uh, Intel, uh, obviously AMD, obviously Microsoft, Oracle, Red Hat, Lenovo, Dell, HP, Broadcom, Meta, formerly Facebook. Linux is also in this. Google Cloud, Broadcom. They are all part of this advisory board to kind of set this in motion. They want to enhance customer choices and compatibility across hardware. So again, you just have more devices that basically the only difference between AMD and Intel going forward will be the GPU integrations, but you won't have this valley of performance differences essentially for them. They want to simplify the architecture, as I mentioned before, to kind of just make this easier, and then enabling greater, more efficient integrations for new capabilities repeated. Now, that's the news. Here's the editorial. I personally think it may be too late. And we had a conversation about this quickly offline. And I say this not to be negative. I think competition is great. They'll keep pushing each other forward. But I think at the end of the day, it may be futile because what ARM presents for a lot of people is mobile access in addition to PC access, personal computing
Hmm.
access. What Intel presents is enhanced PC interactions, and that's it. And servers, not to take away from, but server actions as well. You don't get the mobile component. So if you're a developer and you've already created an app, or maybe you're just a new developer and you're thinking, all right, which platform do I want to target? Which architecture do I want to go after? Brand spanking new. I can do the new x86 that gets some of the mobile features, or I can do the ARM, which is already on mobile, and there are already new devices that use that same architecture that'll just I can port my device, import my app experience over to that thing. I can be on phones and PCs, or I can be on PCs really well. It's really a hard sell, I think, at that point for AMD and Intel. But I have been wrong plenty of times. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think they've got to cozy up together to kind of put up a fight against Qualcomm in some way. Kind of like you mentioned there, there's a different architecture, and Intel is definitely playing catch up. I even saw where something this week where they're selling off some assets for something that they had acquired to try to come up with money, and it kind of surprised. That was the headline. Intel trying to come up with cash. That's kind of telling to me. And AMD, I think, is ahead of Intel as far as efficiency, the efficiency and power thing, but we've got to ultimately battle Qualcomm, or they're going to keep coming. Somebody has to throw a punch at Qualcomm and see how they take it.
Yeah,
Do they
well,
say,
not only
"Oh,
throw a punch, because I will tell you right now, I've been testing a Lunar Lake device. They have to throw a punch and land like this one does.
yes,
You can. Intel's been whiffing at Qualcomm since Qualcomm's been announced. They've tried to go after them in mobile, and they've completely missed the boat, dodge, missed that one. So again, they can throw punches. They have to land them, and I think one of the first steps so far has been this Lunar Lake chip. But I didn't mean to run over your thoughts. Okay,
oh
keep
no,
going.
no, no, you're good." And I think we have to. We're going to see a unified front for a while because I think Intel and AMD have decided, okay, we're just going to sit here and one up each other. Intel's going to be ahead for a year, AMD's going to be ahead for a year. And I think they have decided that's the way it's going to be between us. But together, we support the same instruction set, the x86 instruction set. So we have to work together to make sure that all apps run efficiently without software. The Qualcomm has the what's the translation layer? It has slipped my brain. The Microsoft translation layer. What's the name of it?
Oh,
Microsoft. Yeah, it has. It was on the tip of my tongue.
uh,
Prism. No,
yes,
yeah, it is Prism.
I think you're right.
Um, Microsoft has Prism running in the background on these Qualcomm laptops. And as we mentioned off mic, Qualcomm has the battery life. They've got the efficiency down. But you start loading up 32-bit applications or 64-bit applications that translation layer has to kick in, that battery life starts dropping quickly.
Mhm.
So developers can choose, as you said, what platform to target. Do they want to target the x86? Do they want to target Qualcomm? And I think what Intel and AMD are trying to do is say, okay, come over here. The chips are efficient. Nobody has to modify any code. If you're already in the x86 platform, which a lot of things are, most things are, so you don't have to hire an ARM developer or you don't have to translate your code. And I think this is the fight we've been waiting for. I mean, what crossed my mind this morning? I'm a shower thinker. A lot of people do their thinking on the way to work. And I was taking my shower this morning and Apple popped into my brain for some reason. And it dawned on me, how quick did Apple drop Intel? I mean, it was cold. It was, here's the M1. A month later, here's the M1 desktop. Okay, so Intel got dropped in the cold pretty quick here, and then they took the punch that AMD, or not AMD, Qualcomm has thrown. It's time for them to punch back, and as you said, land the punch and make it work for developers. And I don't know that this partnership is so much for hardware as it is to make software work for developers with a consistent hardware platform.
With that being said, I'll let you wrap that one up unless you have anything else to say on that one.
I'll go ahead.
We're going to go to our next story, which is Google stealing OneDrive users. I really should have just named it that. But the less clickbaity headline is basically Google expands its migration tool to target OneDrive users.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I like the first one, get more clicks for that one. But essentially, Google is targeting OneDrive users. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think this is what we're going to see as part of the cloud wars that we seem to be going through. So, right now, Google has upped the ante. You can now, we'll call it migrate. That's the word I want to use. You can now migrate up to 100 users from Google. Wait a minute, from OneDrive to Google. Let me make sure I get this right. So it says, under the umbrella of data migration services, we are introducing a new file migration service for admins to transfer between OneDrive data to Google Drive for up to 100 users. Available directly under the admin console, super admins can now migrate your files, folders, as well as corresponding access permissions with shared members. Now, what's interesting about this is I've done some of these migrations. You've been able to migrate email for a while. It's a little clunky going back and forth. And I think, each company, Google and Microsoft, have made it clunky for a reason to try to keep you in whichever platform you choose. But now that we can get the file migrations, what can Microsoft do to stop this? I guess, as you mentioned off mic, they could modify the API in some way. They could restrict access, but then that gets into the argument of, the EU or somebody's going to investigate that for not allowing consumers to make the choice of which cloud platform they want to use. So it's nice to see. This reminds me of the cell phone battles. AT&T would have a perk that you wanted or would be a little cheaper. You'd go do that for a year. Then, back in the Sprint days, Sprint would have a perk that you wanted. You'd go do that for a year. And you just sit there. I'm guilty of it. You would just sit there and migrate your phone number from one to the other, to the other, to the other. And you'd go back. And as long as your bill was paid, you could go back and forth any way you wanted to. And I think this is what we're going to see here with, you know, these cloud wars. Once we get where people can migrate back and forth freely, you're going to
Yeah,
start seeing
you'd
perk
mentioned what could
promotions.
Microsoft
But
do to stop this, and both you and I went to the cynic capitalist uh, anti-competitive method of like, hey, we could screw with the APIs, we could send someone from Microsoft over to their house with a gun and say don't do it. But I think the bottom line is make a better product, give a better experience. That is what the customers should want from Microsoft in order to do this. We'd mentioned offline about how this is fair game. As a Microsoft enthusiast and fan, I understand that this is still a business, and Microsoft is doing a very similar thing. For those of you who do use Edge, you know this. For those of you who don't, you're able to migrate and port over bookmarks, passwords, save favorites, and all that from Chrome to Edge. So it's a very
Mhm.
similar sort of situation. I do appreciate that they're also incorporating permissions because that is another step that would make things kind of cumbersome and difficult is to migrate all that over and then have to tell the same people that had access to things like I got to give it back to you. We got to email each other codes and stuff like that, um, or restarting over your permission structure as far as it's concerned. Um, the distinction here, though, is that for Edge and Chrome migrations, that's for consumer level. Like we can do this when you start a new PC, when you download Edge and start using it as a Windows user today. Currently, if you go to the store right now, this tool is only for businesses, and I wonder if it's only being made for business. And Microsoft's kind of you know having hands off about it because it's only for business. I wonder when this sort of migration will be available for workspace, well, not in workspace, but Google Drive users in the general, where customers can just say, "Hey, you know what? I'm tired of using OneDrive. Their search system sucks. Let me move all my stuff over." And then we had mentioned again in our discussion offline about how this migration stuff is going to start to further get blurred, depending on what the FTC does when it comes to finding Google for its search abilities. One of the I believe remedies that was being tossed up at the time was allowing or forcing Google to share its gathered data from users with other search engine providers. So will there be a point where you can just say, you know what, I want to start using Edge, and I actually want to use Bing, but I want to use it with the way that I had my information before, structured my searches and everything like that, my search history, my preferences, and the way that ads were being displayed to me, because this will help boost Microsoft Bing almost immediately. The ads that Bing shows you right now are kind of convoluted. They don't really apply to you. It's because they don't have the data for it. But if they were able to get that from Google, because the FTC forced them to, that changes things. And now it's just it becomes a aesthetic. Which aesthetic do you like for your browser? Which aesthetic do you like for your cloud storage? Which aesthetic do you like for your operating system? It becomes more consumer friendly. That's all I got to say about that. Unless you want to put a period
I
on it.
yeah, you know what I would like to see, and this would be across the board, whether it's business or consumer. And I don't think this would. I think this, in neither company is going to look at what I'm about to say and tell me I've got a great idea. But I think if we saw something that was consistently cross syncing to where you could sign into the Microsoft platform, you could sign into the Google platform, and as long as you had a matching accounts and a place for things to land, you could set it up in such a way where the sync is almost real time. And that way consumers could choose what platform they wanted to use for this, what platform they wanted to use for that. Give consumers that choice, because I think of myself. I've had a Hotmail account for many years, like everybody else. I had an old MSN.com account for, many years. But when I got my Google account, that's where I just naturally migrated to. And I've got roughly 500,000 emails sitting in a personal Gmail account. I would love to be able to move those things to Outlook now, because the software experience in some ways I like better. But
This
there's
reminds,
that whole
yeah,
there's that whole migration piece there. So I would love to see something to where, okay, we're going to at least allow you to sync your data, and then you choose the platform and the experience that you want to use.
this reminds me of that what was it, Movies Everywhere or Movies Anywhere, or whatever thing
Movies everywhere. Yeah.
that allowed people to basically take their movies that were bought on Google Play or Apple's TV beforehand, Microsoft movies and TV, and kind of be able to play them anywhere on that one particular platform. Uh, it reminds us sort of that, but it's all still platforms none of us actually own or create ourselves. So you're basically just hoping a third party can take all your data and hold it while you basically redistribute it. I think an easier thing right now is just the API plugins for the File Explorer, which allows you to put in Google Drive right next to OneDrive, and you can basically navigate on, again, it's a Windows PC, but through the File Explorer, like, all right, I'll put a file in there, I'll put a file there, I'll put a copy of both files in both drives and stuff like that, so that when you're out and about on your phone, you can have access to those kind of things. It can be done, but to your point, it should be simplified, and hopefully that's what we'll see going forward. We'll move on to our next story, which is Qualcomm canceling its Snapdragon Dev Kit. Now, a story and a half ago, we were just talking about the opportunity that Qualcomm has presented and forced AMD and Intel to reckon with, and it looks like they immediately dropped the ball on that. They decided they are going to cancel this pretty baby that we're looking at on the screen, for those of you who are listening to us, it's the dev kit that they introduced back in June. It's a
Looks a lot
what amounts
like
to a mini
Windows
PC.
on ARM kit.
Correct. With the Snapdragon logo on it. The announcement came yesterday, I believe, and this is after some YouTubers and developers have already gotten their hands on the first batch of them, which also follows, again, what was that, June, July, August, September, a 3 month announcement about these things coming out. Or was this at build? It could have been even, it's anywhere from 4 to 3 months that these things should have been out and in hands of people who are going to potentially push that Windows on ARM development uh, wave. The reason why they are canceling is because Qualcomm sent out, and again, this wasn't an announcement from Qualcomm. These are just uh, emails to customers, people, developers who got it, and YouTubers who got it, that it didn't meet the Qualcomm usual standard of excellence. They will be issuing refunds for the $899 mini PC for anybody who went out and bought it with their own money. They were claiming there were production issues, which helped or which forced delays. Particularly, I believe it's something with the HDMI ports as well. Um, and despite the cancellation, Qualcomm does plan to release a future version of the Snapdragon X series mini PC, but through OEMs. So it looks like they pivoted. They won't perhaps make their own, but they will license it out so that Dell can make one, so that HP and Acer and the rest of them can. Now I don't know when in the process they've decided to do that. Hopefully it was months ago, so that these OEMs can start producing actual hardware for people by the end of this month or next month before we start of the new year. Because if they've just now decided to do that, this could be, the first quarter that we start seeing these things come out. And again, I don't have a dog in this fight when it comes to this Windows on ARM versus Intel or anything like that. I think everyone should have the most amount of options, but I do feel like this is a missed opportunity by Qualcomm. Again, whether it be their own fault or just hardware delays or whatnot, uh, they had the momentum as far as consumers are concerned, as reviewers are concerned, and they dropped it. Now, not to say that they won't be ahead, but it seems like an own goal in this. What are your thoughts?
I agree 100% with you. I don't, excuse me, I don't have a dog in the fight. I've got two Snapdragon laptops here that we are reviewing. Both are impressive. I've got some Intel machines. Those are impressive. I don't have one of the new AMD machines. Maybe we can make that happen, but I want consumers to have choice of what they want, and I want their software to run on one single platform, regardless of how that happens, whether that's through the Prism layer with translation or whether that is the chips make it happen. Because I feel like when I think of this battle, I was in Best Buy the other day. Now, I'm not the typical person. I have no desire to walk around and read spec sheets. We do this, we do this podcast, we do the website. We can look at a device and without even getting within 10 feet of it, pretty much know what its specs are and what it's capable of. But what I paid attention to was the marketing. When I got to Best Buy, there was one of those easels out front, right in front of the door that you had to walk around. That's what I noticed. You had to walk around it. It was advertising these Copilot PCs, and it was advertising the Surface Copilot PCs, not the Dells, the HPs, but the Surface Copilot PCs. So you walked into the store, and you had Copilot PCs on one side, you had Intel and AMD, what we'll call standard everyday PCs on the other side. And there's no dividing line. There was no marketing dividing line. There was nothing to tell the consumer the difference between Copilot PCs and standard Intel x86 and AMD x86 PCs. There was nothing. And I kind of grilled the sales guy as a consumer. They knew very little. They didn't know the things that I felt like they would need to know to effectively convince me to buy a Copilot PC. So I think where we've got to land in this with Qualcomm and Intel and everybody together, and I think that's part of the reason these dev kits got called back. I think Qualcomm says, look, maybe we need to give this a round two instead of trying to do this with round one, because we want to get to a point where the consumer walks into the store, they have a task, a reason, and they're able to choose whichever one they want. And I
Now,
think,
in all fairness, Microsoft yanked the reason that people could easily identify Copilot Plus PCs from Intel PCs.
true, that's
So
true, that's
even if
true.
you are a novice employee at Best Buy, the idea that Microsoft would have walked up to you or any of the representatives for any of these Copilot Plus PCs and said, "Hey, recall. Recall is the thing that you're going to sell people on." It's hard to talk about Copilot
What's that?
exactly. It's hard to talk about Copilot as a feature for Copilot Plus PCs when Intel ones can still do the same thing. But recall is the only thing that can be done on this particular chip. This is the reason why you buy that one. Microsoft said, "Yoink, we're going to take that from you." And so maybe this is Qualcomm saying, "You know what? We're not in danger of losing anything because there was no upsell except for maybe the battery life." Now, perhaps the employees at Best Buy could say, "Hey, this one gets 13 hours. That one gets 10 hours." That's the only other benefit they had. And now that these Lunar Lake chips are coming out,
Mm.
that has been kind of chiseled away at. So, it may seem dramatic the way that we're presenting it in the story. Again, they said that they're going to have, OEMs kind of produce these things, and maybe they'll produce better ones, better quality, smaller, maybe in a fit and finish that you like. They're coming from a brand you trust. They will have their custom bloatware slash software on it that you may prefer. Maybe Qualcomm just is figuring out we don't need to produce our own. We just got to give our partners the ability to do it. The other thing that should be noted is that there was only a price difference really for these things because you can take a current Copilot Plus PC that's powered by Snapdragon and develop on it currently. So if your employer or employee or whatever needed one of these things, you can go out and buy a Surface laptop. You can go out and buy the Vivo book and start developing right away. Uh, I think people are just waiting to get that dedicated thing so that they don't have to mess with their own personal computers or work computers or travel with that. So uh, in all reality, it's not the worst thing to happen to them. It does kind of give them a tarnished reputation as far as
Mm.
deliverables are concerned. When you say, "Hey, we're going to do something and it's going to, make all these changes and we're going to have it by the certain time," and not only are you late, but then you immediately cancel it, it starts to chip away at that trust factor that you had kind of built up. But I
What,
don't
what
need to belabor that anymore.
I tell you, I won't belabor it, but something I noticed this week in the consumer world that concerned me. There was some deep, deep sales on some of the Qualcomm PCs. I saw the Samsung down from $11.99 to $7.99. Then this morning I saw the Surface laptop on an ad, the 15-inch with 16 gigs of RAM was down to $12.99, and there was one other that I saw, so I won't say it was the Asus, but anyway, um, it made me think. Now, usually when you see, we've got Black Friday here, and let's call it 3.5 weeks.
Mhm.
We're seeing sales this deep already. Normally, when you see this type of sale, it means two things: a product isn't doing well, there's too much stock, and we need to move it, or that means, hey, something else is on the horizon. Let's move it so we've got room for new stock. So when I saw both those high value items with popular names on them, solid laptops, go deep on sale like this right before Black Friday, it concerned me about the state of the ARM laptop.
I think you have a right to be concerned, and I also believe that multiple things can be true at once. So it could be that they produce too many of these things, they aren't selling
Yeah.
well, or they are clearing inventory for something new. And again, maybe these OEMs are saying, "You know what, we overshot on the Snapdragon, but we do have this Lunar Lake thing that's a little easier for us to sell. We know that it'll produce, just as well as the Snapdragon ones without the marketing behind it. Because again, they don't really have all they what they're going to say now is that you have better battery life. You still have Copilot. You'll have access to recall if and when that ever comes out. Now you just have better battery life, and that's a lot less marketing than saying, "All right, we got this thing that has some native apps that doesn't have some native apps that it uses a translation layer that does get you better battery life, but and you'll have in the future access to your mobile phone apps to distinguish it between the. I mean, I've already rambled on way too much, way too long for what the value proposition is. So Intel Lunar Lake ones and AMD ones may just be easier for them to say, all right, let's flush that marketing budget, call it a loss, and move on to the next thing. Who knows? But we will be talking about some Lunar Lake stuff in not this next headline, but the one after it. So you want to get into your headline, though? We're going to bring it back to gaming.
Yep, let's go back to gaming for just a minute, folks. I've got one here that was interesting to me that was actually the end of last week. The Verge was reporting last week that Microsoft plans to support streaming of your Xbox library next month. What this means is if the games are not on Game Pass, there's a Project 10 that's been running inside Microsoft called Lapland that will allow you to put your game that is not on Game Pass in the cloud and be able to play it. So let me think of something that's not in the cloud. Quick one that comes to mind: Madden 25 is not there yet. Madden 24 made it to the cloud at the end of the football season last year. I would expect Madden 25 to do the same thing, but in theory, what you would be able to do is say, look, Madden 25 is not available in the cloud right now. I would like to play Madden 25 in the cloud. And you would be able to do that. Now, I think this is a good thing. I also have one concern. The good thing is this tells me that Microsoft has come up with a turnkey way for games to work in the cloud. That they don't have to do the testing and any type of code manipulation, etc. That there's a turnkey way for this to work because they've turned it over to consumers. The negative part of this makes me think, I hope it is turnkey, and I hope all games are created equal in this turnkey system. Because if somebody gets a game that doesn't perform well or doesn't perform the way it does on the console, there's a problem.
Well,
I commend. Go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead. No, you finish up.
I commend Microsoft for what they're doing here, but I have a concern that will every game truly be available? That's my first concern because there's licensing and competition to think about there. And we do know what came to mind for me was GE Force Now. GE Force Now is a cloud gaming service that is an NVIDIA service. They have to get licensing and agreements to put these games in the cloud. So has Microsoft done that legwork with every publisher and every developer out there, and you will literally get to choose any Xbox game? I have my concerns.
Again, you are right to have those concerns. I was thinking the same thing as you were going through the story. Um, First off, I was, as soon as you read the headline, I was like, we talked about this. We talked about this years ago. And it
Hmm.
came and went. Microsoft just quietly let it go and never brought it up again, and everyone kind of moved on. And they said, all right, well, we'll do the Game Pass theory, which is basically Netflix. Like, we will rent games for a certain amount of time, and they will disappear and reappear, whenever the gaming gods see fit. And everyone seemed okay with that. This idea needs a little bit more fleshing out because, to your point, again, licensing, compatibility is the biggest one because again they aren't basically I don't know if they're necessarily going to go to every developer and say, hey, these are the things we want to do. I think they're going to put in a layer just kind of like Prism and say, all right, if your game meets these minimum requirements, it will be in your personal cloud to then only be played by you, and you will probably lose out access on the multiplayer facets of these games, the online aspects of you might be able to play the single player mode if it's something like that. I don't know if you're going to be able to tap into the multiplayer matchmaking stuff like that on the cloud version of it. Again, if you have the regular version, you'll be able to do that kind of stuff. Uh, I don't know if, and again, if they say it's going to be next month, I feel like there's a lot to be talked about. We just had the recent gaming showcase. I didn't remember them talking too much about that during then. But I, suspect over the next week or two, they will again hopefully flush out these ideas because if they don't, they could get sued, and that could be a lot of money, unnecessary money that they are going to have to spend legally. But I don't have any more thoughts on that. Do you? We can go to our next story.
No, no, no. For now, I'm okay.
All right. I will be cautiously optimistic for this next month. Last story is Microsoft is experimenting with Lunar Lake chips in the Surface laptop. The next one potentially. We've talked a lot about Lunar Lake today. You might be saying, "All right, guys, enough. What is this?" If you again haven't been keeping up with the news, but Intel has produced a more efficient version of their core processing chips. So this is the, I believe, the 14th generation, and someone in China, I believe, was trying to sell one of these new Surface laptops. What we all believe will be the seven Surface Laptop 7 with this new chip inside. Again, the chassis looks very much the same. Microsoft just went through a visual redesign, an aesthetic redesign for the Surface laptops. I don't see them changing, at least for the next 3 to 5 years, because they were very slow with this. But the listing that was being sold had a specification of the Intel Core Ultra 7 268 volt processor with 32 gigabytes of RAM and 1 terabyte of SSD storage. The performance of Intel's Lunar Lake offers better efficiency and better graphic performance, while it takes a dip in the overall amount of cores available. I think you go from 12 to 8 with these new chips. But again, it's all designed at efficiency. So your single core stuff, it runs really well on these. Again, the potential launch for a Surface Laptop 7 window wouldn't be till next year anyway. And again, Intel's already started seeding these Core Ultra 7 chips to reviewers and other businesses to start playing around with. And like I said, personally, anecdotally, I have one. It gives very similar extended battery life. It is beyond what we've had with previous generations of Intel chips, and it is almost on par when it comes to what Qualcomm is offering. And again, we saw that jump when Microsoft announced it going, the average PC, giving you anywhere from 7 to 10 hours with moderate use, and perhaps 4 to 6 with heavy use. And then Qualcomm showed up, and if you weren't again using the translation layer, you can get upwards of 15 to 18 hours with this new Intel one, with no translation layer, still running everything with the x86 architecture. Off battery, you're getting very similar numbers as the Qualcomm one. So it is an impressive chip. It is an impressive time. I suspect Microsoft's also testing potentially the new AMD and MediaTek if they're going to be using anything for the laptop Goes or any other smaller handheld device service laptop. So I said all this to say that Microsoft seems to be reopening up the customization options for service devices going forward. We will have a Qualcomm like we currently have and an Intel, and I believe depending on how these new AMDs do, especially with this new partnership, we'll probably be getting an AMD variant of a Surface laptop or probably Surface laptop. I doubt they're going to be messing around with the Pro too much variant. So we're back to the Wild Wild West confusing days of configurations, but multiple options for everybody who needs a PC. What are your thoughts on that?
One thing I want to throw out my I don't know if you saw it or not. My browser just froze there for a minute. I don't know if I cut out, disappeared, or what. I was sitting
No,
here
you were
listening to
good.
you, and it just froze. Um, as far as the new Surface, I think when or the potential new Surface laptop. Let me say it that way. One, I think it's a little bit more than potential. Microsoft has proven they will run 2 chips and even 3. I think we had, if you think back to the first Surface Pro X, I think we had the Pro X, we had the AMD version of the Surface laptop, and then we had the Intel version. So I think Microsoft has already proven that they will run 3 chips and they will give love equally to all 3. I think this is good for the consumer. I think it's smart for Microsoft to be testing these things, but I think there's a bigger picture here. This is a new battle. We have had two stories, this being the third, on this podcast where we have talked about the efficiency of these new AMD chips, the Intel chips, and the Snapdragon chip. This is new. Are OEMs willing to run multiple versions? Microsoft was the first to do it, to my knowledge. Sure, Dell's got a Qualcomm now. Samsung's got a Qualcomm now. But Microsoft, back when the Pro X first came out, was the first to run all three versions. Successful or not, that's not what I'm getting at. But Microsoft is testing. I would be surprised, or wouldn't be surprised, if the next Surface laptop or even the next Surface Pro has an Intel Lunar Lake option.
Yeah, no,
Instead of,
it's
I
like I said,
expect that.
it's a great chip.
How does the third chip maker get treated? Is what I'm curious about.
Yeah, my question is, when do they invite AMD to the Surface Pro party? Because for now, it's been relegated to the laptop, and I wonder if that's concerns about fan or uh, off battery usage or unplugged kind of things. Because I know that AMD historically likes to throttle its performance when it's unplugged, ramp it back up. And if the Surface Pro is designed to be the ultra portable 2-in-1, do they just say, you know what, we can't even risk someone using your throttle performance on our Pro. But who knows? Maybe this new chip is much more performant, and they say, you know what, AMD, you're welcome to the Surface Pro party as well. And then we'll have all three chips in one device versus two chips in one, and three chips in another. And like I said, I wouldn't count MediaTek out of this either, because again, you still have the Surface Pro Laptop Go as an option
So
for
that's four.
devices. Exactly. So I'm happy that the chip wars are back,
That's what
and
I
that
was going to
we
say. The chip wars are back. You pulled that right off my tongue there, bud.
get more options. I'm not thrilled to field all the questions from my relatives and friends about which chips and specs they should all start being concerned about, but I am happy that we are getting more options. With that being said, that's our last story for today. Where can people find you if they want to continue this conversation on a different platform?
I would love to, or come a week from now, look for me for Call of Duty. So, David PAJ 1978. I will have some. We just got a brand new Lenovo gaming laptop in for review. I will have the Lenovo ecosystem up and in full steam. Feel free to drop a note. I'd be glad to play with some of you guys. We can have a conversation while we try to figure out this new Call of Duty, or you can have a conversation with me while you watch me miss everything I aim at it. Totally up to you.
Hey, that's the servers. Remember, always the server's fault. You can find me at Mindhead1 on Twitter as long as I'm there. I am making a concerted effort to be more on Threads and Instagram. I just find it a much nicer, happier place to be. And if you're interested in meeting me there, it's Kareem Anderson. Just very simple. I will also be talking about gaming, new review hardware. We got a ton of it in. Stay tuned to the website to read the reviews that are coming in. Maybe I'll do some unboxing. I'm not very good at that kind of stuff, so bear with me if I do put up something. Uh, put your negative comments out there, but at least be thoughtful in what you say about it. With that being said, I want you guys to go out, enjoy the weather. If it's nice where you're at, enjoy the weekend, and we will talk to you again next week with more Microsoft news.
Have a good weekend, folks. Thanks.